I'm joined here by Dr Ran Porat, who's a research associate here at AIJAC and also Reichman University in Israel, and he is an academic at Monash University. Ran, thank you for joining us today.
Hi, Rebecca.
I want to start off, we've seen in the past couple of days the release of some horrifically grotesque hostage videos from PIJ and Hamas of two Israeli hostages, Aviatar David and also Rom Braslavsky. Can you share with us a little bit of insight as to the timing of the release of these videos, because we haven't seen any for a while?
So the timing is, of course, a decision of these terrorist organizations. And according to analysis published in official Hamas channels, it was deliberately focused or targeted into feeding the narrative of famine in Gaza. And the argument is that Israelis don't care if Gazans are starving, never mind if it's true or not, but they will be touched by the view or the scenes of their own people emaciated, digging their own grave, which is a horrible scene that's all, staged. And that will actually give more power to those inside Israel, and we can hear now voices inside Israel that are actually adopting that narrative. And of course, the aim is to put more pressure on the Israeli government to make concessions vis-a-vis Hamas in either negotiations or whatever is happening between the two sides.
Mm-hmm. We're 668 days into this war. Off the back of last week's ceasefire negotiations coming to nowhere, a road to nowhere yet again, and Hamas are now saying they won't disarm unless there is a promise of an independent Palestinian state. What's the road ahead from here?
I can only say what I see, that the scenarios or the different operational ways are being weighed in on both sides. So Hamas has very little options. And they are under the sort of impression or under the feeling that this road gave them some sort of advantages, some sort of benefits, meaning the continued suffering of the population, the continued oppression and actual campaign of blocking aid from going into the hands or the stomachs of the people in Gaza. And the benefits, as Razi Hamed, one of the leaders of Hamas, has noted in the last 2 days, is, for instance, the wave of countries recognizing or stating that they will recognize a Palestinian state soon. So Hamas is sort of with his back to the wall in a sense, in that sense that Israel is demanding a complete disarming and maybe exiling of their leaders, and Israel is openly saying we will not accept your existence or your power in the strip in the day after the war. And that is, by the way, a sentiment and a red line repeated by everyone, including Australia, including the countries in the West and the US, and then the Arab states. The Arab League issued a very strong statement that says no Hamas in the future. So Hamas feels that they have nothing to lose. So they're hardening their position, also because they've moved into more consultation sort of with other factions in the strip. There exists the PIJ, the PFLP, all sorts of other factions, and the lowest common denominator is being negative or rejecting any flexibility. So that's on the Hamas side. On the Israeli side, there is one last attempt to reach a sort of all-out deal of everything for everything. Release all the hostages now, the living and the non-living. Israel is willing to discuss a major redeployment outside of the Gaza Strip or inside the Gaza Strip, and all sorts of, and release of lots of, terrorists in Israeli prisons. So there's a willingness to discuss this all-out deal. But there is a sense now, at least in the Israeli government, that the chances for Hamas to agree are slim. So now they have to weigh in what is the operational stage next, or what could happen next. So there are two major options reportedly. One is a complete conquest of the rest of the Gaza Strip. There are two areas where the IDF hasn't been really operating extensively. That's the city of Gaza itself, and what we call the refugee camps in the central of the Strip. And this is where allegedly or reportedly hostages are being held in the worst possible conditions. So that's one option that the army is not happy about. The other option is sort of encircling these areas, putting pressure there on Hamas and the population, and conducting incursions in and out into, according to operational needs, possibly maybe rescuing hostages or hitting on, Hamas leaders like Izzadin al-Khadar, the last standing Hamas leader. So these are what the media is telling us. Possibly there are other options that are not discussed and might be the surprise that Israel is preparing, but it does look like it's going to a military escalation, and that is not something Israel wants. The hostages' families definitely don't want. The people of Gaza don't want, but Hamas seems to have chosen that, and at least that's how it looks now.
There's another aspect to this war, the information war, and particularly in the past week, we've seen that play out with the misrepresentation of images of skeletal children being over the front page of the New York Times, picked up by various mainstream media. It's created a lot of pressure, and we've seen that culminate in the protests that we saw yesterday in our own country, in Sydney, on the Sydney Harbour Bridge, Melbourne. Can you speak a little bit as to what you've observed between the connection, or the correlation rather, of the information war, the propaganda that's disseminated from Hamas, and the very real impact that has in the strategic operations of this war?
It's a good question. So first of all, we have to remember, put aside the info war, that yes, there is suffering and pain and a catastrophe in Gaza.
Yes.
But put that aside. Hamas has been building a propaganda machine for the last 2 decades at least. It has people across from the various places, planted in various Hamas structures. They have a close cooperation with Al Jazeera, the Qatari network. They have received money and guidance from Iran. So we have that propaganda machine ready to work. They've got their spokesperson, Abu Ubaidah, famous one. He's a hero in the Arab world. At the same time, we know for a fact that the UN organizations operating in Gaza have started very soon after the war began, way before now, with this campaign saying that Israel is doing these horrible things in Gaza, that Israel is pushing for famine and starvation, even when at the beginning of the war there was zero evidence for that. And even now we know that Israel is not aggressive, wants people in Gaza to starve. That's not the Israeli policy. So that sort of combination of UN organizations with the propaganda machine, with the people, every journalist in Gaza, or many of them, have lots of connections and ties with Hamas. And the pictures coming out serve that narrative, the narrative of Palestinians as the victims, which they are now the weaker side in the conflict, sure. But it sort of erases any Hamas responsibility to what has happened. That war of images, the war of narratives, is also done in a very 21st century mode. So TikTok style, buzzwords, images, as you mentioned that image, which we know was not had nothing to do with reality. So it's a very hard battle to fight. All you can do in response is highlight the other side. That, for instance, Israel has been flooding the Strip with aid. Flooding, thousands of trucks a day, airdrops, tons and tons of food and all sorts of aid. And that is sort of odd. You don't see the Russians, giving aid to the Ukrainians. And you don't see the Ukrainians giving aid to the Russians. During the war, that's not how it works. But Israel is taking responsibility. The problem is not the aid being pumped into Gaza. The problem what happens to the aid inside Gaza. And we know that Hamas steals from it, that gangs steal aid, that people, there's lawlessness, there's lots of chaos there. So the bottom line is that that protest we saw in Sydney doesn't speak about a solution. It only speaks about blame and accusation. And we know many of these elements that were involved in that protest were connected to, we saw a picture of Ali Khamenei, the leader of Iran, We saw signs which are anti-Semitic 100%. We saw all sorts of images which are un-Australian and offered nothing. Stop the war, end the war. We all want the war to end, but Israel cannot end the war before hostages are released. That would not be a possibility. Would you allow a war to continue or to end without saving your own people? So that's how I feel strongly about those protests.
And obviously what's missing from this as well is the stated claim. Yahya Sinwar, the former Hamas leader and mastermind of October 7, stated very clearly that the Palestinian civilians are necessary sacrifices, his words, for what they call the ultimate end in their charter, if you look, as a complete commitment to the obliteration of a state of Israel. So in your mind, why is this missing from, this seems like a key point that's missing from any of the narratives that are playing out in the media?
That's a good question, and I'll tell you what I'm often asked. Why do Israelis go back to October 7th? It's been 2 years, and Israel has done many things since then, and the reality has changed. It's because of that point you made. So when they captured the documents that the Nukhba terrorists were carrying into Israel on October 7th, it was an organized plan that would end with the destruction of Israel.
Yes.
Not a fantasy. Sure, it's based on these, prophecies. It's called the other promise, the Al-Waid al-Akhir, al-Ukhra. It's a prophecy. It's not grounded in reality. But that is not only the stated purpose of Hamas until this very day. What is happening in Hamas now, that catastrophe, as you noted, it's part of the plan. The suffering of the Palestinians. It's part of the plan to delegitimize Israel, to undermine it. And sadly, in a sense, it's actually, there's some fruit to it. The fruit is that tsunami of countries recognizing Palestinian state, which at this point doesn't exist, doesn't have borders, doesn't have leadership, it's unclear if Hamas will be part of it or not. So the suffering of Palestinians and the highlighting of it serves the Hamas purpose. The only way to undermine Hamas is to alleviate the suffering, first and foremost, but not just end the war abruptly with no, addressing also the Israeli side, the Israeli grievances. Nobody's talking about the Israeli grievances. There is also suffering on the Israeli side. I'm not comparing, but it exists.
Can you speak a little bit further as to the suffering that you're seeing playing out? And I want to hone in on this because we're talking about very much international media headlines and narratives playing out. You're an avid consumer of the Israeli media, but also Arab media. So if we look at those more internal stories, what is it that you're seeing?
So first of all, the Arab media and the Israeli media, of course, it's a diverse voices. But I can say this. Israelis have endured 2 years of rockets, drones, missiles, funerals, pain, internal strife, internal conflict. There's a huge rise in all sorts of mental issues, lots of issues that are, economic toll. Again, I'm not comparing, but there is a huge cost to the war on Israelis. And all recent polls have shown consecutively that Israelis want the war to end. Israelis are not looking to harm the Palestinians. They never did. All they want is the other side to finally accept the fact that Israel is going nowhere, unlike what the Hamas plan was envisaging, sort of thinking about. And also they want the hostages to come back because that topic has been tearing Israeli society from within.
Yeah.
Healing cannot start unless the government is able to secure that basic part of the agreement between a state and its citizens, the security of the citizens, the safeguarding of its citizens, and the caring for your prisoners. So, again, the suffering of Gazans is immense. Their pain is immense. They are stuck between a rock and a hard place. But the conflict cannot end unless the needs, the basic necessities of the Israeli side are met.
Dr. Ran Porat, thank you always for your searing insights and for your analysis.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you.